Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Victor and I help people navigate through their awakening process. And in this video, I'm going to describe a very notable phase of the awakening process that some of you may be in now and having various struggles associated with it. And some of you might be on the verge of breaking out of it. And I'm just going to share my personal experience with this phase, different characteristics and aspects of it, different challenges, how to overcome them, and also perhaps give you that push to help you move on to the next phase. So what phase is this guy talking about? I'm talking about a phase that I call the Hermit phase. It's a phase where you're kind of like, you know, you're going through an awakening. That's not like a mystery to you anymore. And there's just so much internal changes going on with you that you just might naturally, one way or another, find yourself sort of withdrawing from life, withdrawing from your normal everyday hustle and bustle of life. During this stage, it's not uncommon to be unemployed, to kind of like break out of your friends and your old circles, and you sort of drift off kind of, and you're kind of like become like a loner, a little bit of a recluse and an introvert. Because you're going through a lot of things. You might have intense physical symptoms at this time, wild like psychic type openings. You'll also probably find it real challenging to stick with anything. You might have a lot of like pieces of ideas of what you might want to do and where you want to go in life, but you never really get any footing because your perspective on things changes like the wind. You're always changing your mind because you're growing and expanding so fast that it's just a constant reevaluation of everything. Your life, your identity, what you want out of life, what's important to you, your true motives start to come to the surface, and you realize a lot of your life has sort of been created out of like a false identification with this ego that you now are aware of that you have, and all this is going on, and it's a lot to deal with. You're also, one last little aspect is you're very sensitive. You're becoming really empathic, real sensitive to energies, moods of people, and it's just, the real world is just a little bit chaotic feeling, and you don't really want any part of it, and you don't even know what you want to do in it, so you just sort of withdraw. The Hermit phase. The way it worked for me is I sold my home many years ago, and me and my wife and my daughter and a couple dogs, we traveled around the country a little bit in an RV unit. We didn't know where we wanted to go really. And then we finally settled in South Florida and rented a house. And I wasn't working at that time. I was just really into like my diet. I was eating like a 100% strict organic raw vegan diet, and practicing Bikram yoga a lot, and doing like mixed martial arts, and specifically Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. I was really like Zen-like, but I also was exhausted all the time, kind of a mess physically because the symptoms were just so intense. I felt very weird and awkward and overly sensitive in social situations. And it was just a time of me kind of going within. And at that time is when I realized I wanted to be some sort of a teacher. I had no idea how it would manifest. I suspected it might have to do with YouTube. And even though this was like 8 years ago, believe it or not. But every time I would try to do something, nothing ever panned out. It was always like, I'd get the camera set up and I would like, even though last night I had always good ideas and I'd go to do it, and it just would suck. I'd like freeze up and choke up. I'd have like nothing to say. And every time I would try, I would run into some sort of weird issue where it just was like the energies weren't really in sync with me going forward with anything just yet. But as time went on, I started running out of my savings. We were running out of money, and I was sort of used to not doing anything. Because I had withdrawn for so long, the idea of going back into my normal life, you know, becoming a personal trainer again, or moving back to Michigan and getting back with my old buddies, it did not sound like a right fit for me. I felt like I sort of became like a little kid that's never allowed to sleep at his buddy's house, you know, and then when they do, it's like too much. I felt like the world was just too much for me. I did not want to go back. And yet the bills were coming, and no magical instructions were coming to me. I had this desire, like, you got to do something. I want to do something. I'm willing to do work. I'm willing to put forth action into something, but I just don't know what that is. And it was real frustrating. But again, my real world responsibilities were like starting to really blast me in the face, where it's like, you gotta do something, man. But I don't know. It's sort of a weird situation to be in. Like, and I had this sense of impending doom, like a sense of urgency. Like, you better get on the ball. Like, something's not right, Vic. And I didn't know what it was, you know. So finally, we actually went. This is sort of like continuing the story. Sort of the end of this phase for me. We went on this. We took our RV out for another like little spin around the country, and we went to Sedona, Arizona for the first time. Which, by the way, is an amazing, freaking amazing place for all you spiritual people. You'll love it. And we were like, didn't really know where we wanted to go in life. We were kind of searching for a place to live. At the time, we were starting to realize we don't really want to live in Florida forever, but we didn't want to go back to Michigan. We didn't know what the hell we wanted to do. And we got to Sedona, and it was like the coolest place I've ever been to. Beautiful, good weather, spiritual people everywhere you look. And we're like, okay, this is perfect. We're going to move here. This is excellent. And I ended up seeing this medium. She was like a psychic medium who claimed to be able to speak with people's spirit guides. A lot of good reviews, and she was supposed to be really good. And I went to her, and she told me a bunch of shit I didn't want to hear. So I thought she was a phony. She basically was saying, like, you got to go back into the world, man. You're not going to be living in Sedona. This is not your place. You got to go back into the world. You got to start eating meat again, she told me. She's like, you just got to become more physical. You're like living on the mountain and you're not doing anything, just meditating all day over there on the mountain. You've created too much of a gap between you and regular people, and you're just sort of like isolating yourself. And I knew she was right in a sense, but I didn't want to hear that. I was hoping she had some sort of magical instructions for me where I could just sort of live off the grid and meditate and share my energy with the cosmos. But it's just not how it didn't work out for me. And I came to realize that it was just time for me to stand on my own 2 feet, to not rely so heavily on messages coming to me, which have their time and their place, letting synchronicity guide you. It was time for me to become my own guide, my own master, more self-reliant, because there's a time when you're just starting out where we create the experience of synchronicity and messages as something coming from out there, when really it's just a matter of perspective, because those messages coming from out there are in a sense coming from yourself. And there comes a point where you've integrated enough of yourself where you don't need to have the experience of an external source of information. You become your own source of guidance. But that's scary. None of us, in a sense, want to be self-reliant. It's easy to have something or someone to follow, but the ascension is really a rise and ascent to our own state of self-mastery and self-empowerment. But when it came time to actually doing that, I didn't want to do it. It was kind of much a little bit easier, kind of sitting back and withdrawing from society. But again, I ended up sliding way into financial debt. This for the first time. I had done it a couple times, and I resisted that next step. And I made this video because I speak to a lot of you guys now, and you guys message me all the time, and I can gather that a lot of you are at this stage, at the cusp of where it's time to move on. It's time to come into your own self-empowerment. Stop watching 3 hours of like spiritual videos on YouTube every single day, and it's time to actually start doing something and applying your gifts, sharing your energy with the world. And it's scary, and none of you probably feel ready. I didn't feel ready, and it might be nice to have some sort of clear game plan, but that's not going to probably happen. It's just not going to come. You got to sort of forge your own way and just sort of step out into the unknown, trusting that you will be given every little piece that you actually need to keep going forward on your desired and chosen and the path you chose to walk. We don't get a map. We don't get instruction. We get what we need when we need it and not before. And that creates a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, because our minds just loves to have foresight and plans. But it's just not how the fourth density way works. It's about being in the moment, trusting that you always have what you need when you need it. But once you can get past that first step, once you can kind of stand up and start walking, and you stumble a little bit and you have challenges, but you realize that you can overcome them. That you look back and it's been 6 months and you're out there in the world, you're out there doing your thing, and though things aren't perfect, though you're still going through inner and emotional transformations, you have made progress. You are stronger, more self-empowered, more in tune than ever. You're starting to have a positive effect on other people. You're becoming more well acquainted with being in the real world. You're not so sensitive to everything. You're learning how to sort of preserve your own energy bubble, and you just start to it's the next phase. It's the next phase of self-mastery and returning and sharing your gifts. Recently, I recommended a book by Joseph Campbell, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it talks about the different stages of like the archetypal fundamental hero's journey. One who goes through this enlightenment process. And the last phase is always the hero comes back and shares and gives and helps other people with what he learned himself, because it really does the whole no good if people became enlightened and like improved themselves and just went off on their own thing and did their own thing. So you can't resist, the book basically says, you can't really resist the return phase. You'll be forced back in one way or another. A lot of the way the world does that is you got to go make some money now. So you got to get in the world and do something, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So anyway, that might have seemed a little jumbled. I trust some of you, as strange as that little tale and this video has sounded, might resonate with what I just said. Because again, the world needs people who are coming in and returning and sharing your gifts and your energy with the world, being a good, loving example. And it's the idea of it is one thing, but actually doing it is quite scary, and I just hope this video could encourage you to just be one example of someone who's been there and done that. And though it was challenging for me for a while, I in a sense succeeded, where I feel good, and I overcame a lot of the things that I was struggling with for quite a while there. So hope that helps, guys. Thank you very much for all the love and support. I will speak to you next time. Peace.